Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville. Welcome to so many people here who clearly support our local charities, and Council does too, and it's glad to see you. I'd like to invite everybody to join Council in rising to sing O Canada, followed by our prayer. Thank you. Please be seated. I will now read our opening prayer, followed by our moment of silence, at which point we'll begin the meeting proper. God grant us understanding and patience, that justice and truth and honesty may be evident in our decisions. Make us mindful of the needs of the people throughout the town of Oakville. Help us govern with the wider community in mind, and so create in us a desire for progress and responsible action. We ask this in your name. Amen. Thank you, everyone. Madam Clerk, do we have any regrets tonight?
No, Mr. Mayor, we do not.
Thank you. Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Thank you. Before we deal with I guess we could deal with the confirmation of the minutes of the previous council. Councillor Duddock and Councillor Johnston, are there any corrections? All in favor? Opposed, if any? The minutes are adopted. We have no public presentations. We have no delegations. And before we go to the Standing Committee and Committee of the Whole reports, I understand Councillor Khan would like to move that we go into a closed session for the purpose of receiving privileged solicitor-client advice from our solicitors. Councillor Khan.
Do you want us to leave, or do you want the members?
We can do that, but we first need your motion and a second.
I thought you just read my motion. Well, there's a motion brought by myself to go into camera to obtain privileged advice from our council.
We need a seconder. Councillor Duddock. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. We have an opportunity here to let the public who filled the seats rest easy while we retire to another. We have a boardroom where we can go. So we will repair there, and we'll be back. And until then, I guess the public part of the meeting is recessed. All right, I'll resume the public portion of this meeting. Council met in a meeting closed to the public for the purpose of receiving solicitor-client advice that's privileged on the matter of the OLG item on the ASC report. And I will now, I'll just vary the agenda slightly to put the Administrative Services Committee report before Council first, because we have a presentation and a separation from the Community Services report, which will take some time. So, Council, the Administrative Services Committee report is before you. So we need a motion and a second. Councillor Johnston? Councillor Johnston moves it. Well, let me get a second for the report. Councillor Knoll. Councillor Demoff, you want to separate the item 2? All right. Are there any other separations? Shall I put the vote to the rest of the report? Sorry?
Are there any delegations?
No, there are no delegations. I covered that earlier.
Thank you.
All in favor of the balance of the report? Opposed, if any, the report is adopted. Councillor Demoff.
I would like us to defeat item 2 on the agenda, which deals with the e-bingo, in the hopes that we can pass a motion that the agreement be signed subject to a collateral agreement with the town from the OLG, that the town has the right to refuse future products. I think it's much simpler. It will be giving a clear message to OLG where we stand, and it gives us the right to refuse slots and VLTs, which is the aim of what we are concerned about in the first place. So that would be the motion that I hope to introduce, provided we defeat item number 2 on the ASC agenda.
Any other speakers to item 2? Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wonder if I could just get some clarification from staff in regards to the items that were removed if we were to go that route in terms of passing this motion or defeating the other and passing the one Councillor Demoff has indicated. Namely, I guess it's 2, 3, and 4.
Mr. Solicitor, or
Through you, Mr. Chair, the question.
The question basically is saying if we were to go the route that Councillor Demoff is proposing versus the one that was passed at ASC, what is the, those other items that were identified, are they going to be addressed via this motion? They will not, will they?
No, they would not. The only thing that you would need to address in the collateral agreement, if that was the motion that was passed, would be approval of the games that were coming into the town.
And I guess my other question is, unfortunately, I was able to sit in on the meeting that took place that night after I came from CSC. Are there aspects of this agreement that our town legal staff have concerns with in terms of protecting the interests of the corporation, if we were just to leave it at that particular issue and not address those other 3 issues that were identified?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are issues that town legal staff wouldn't put in the agreement if it was drafting the agreement concerning the length of termination and reciprocity in certain events, but it's up to council to decide whether this is acceptable or not.
Okay, I guess what I'm asking in a roundabout way is, those 3 items that are not part of this motion that were identified, was it your recommendation that we go for those 3?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we didn't really make a recommendation. We've highlighted those as issues that council should be concerned about.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
What end? Some of the people didn't get the opportunity to attend that meeting, and so perhaps they would benefit from the opportunity of hearing what those concerns are and how those items might be addressed to the benefit of the corporation.
A 16-year agreement where you do not have a right to terminate, where the other party does have a right to terminate, certainly is a bit unusual. The language of reciprocity there's certainly a number of the clauses are drafted strongly in favor of OLG in the agreement. That's a matter of negotiating position between the parties as to where you'll end up with those. The other concern, I think those were the major concerns.
Recovery of costs, I think.
Well, the recovery of costs, the report highlighted that our revenue share will be going down. Our expenses will be constant.
Okay, and I get the aspect of the amount that we'd be receiving actually would be going back into the community, basically in the form of the charities, which is what we're all trying to achieve. My question was in terms of the enforcement or the actions on behalf of the town, the amount of cost for the licensing. Are we covering our, for lack of a better word, user fees or costs that staff would have to expend in order to monitor this situation?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is no way of knowing what requirements will be made of the town over the next 16 years by the province in the agreement. You're going in blind. Next month, they could say that we will require the town to do A, B, C, and D without any form of compensation, without any form of protection. You are going in on a take-it-or-leave-it basis at that point.
But in that case, OLG has the opportunity to pull the plug if they wanted to, correct?
Correct.
Councillor Demoff.
Our cost recovery is based on a projection, which means that it's currently showing $19,000 less. But it's quite possible that amount could be $29,000 less, or it could be $30,000 more. That's what is shown in that projection, because we really don't know. It's based on a best estimate, but all projections are nothing more than a projection. So that amount of money is nothing more than a best guess. It could be more, or it could be less, or it could be zero. If OLG decides to pull out of Oakville, we'll have zero. So it's not a cast in stone number. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct, Councillor.
Councillor Demoff, I have a question for you. If you're done with your questions, I'm going to wait till you're done, but...
I wanted to ask about the termination rates in terms of the cost recovery. And if there's anyone here from OLG, I would really like to get some clarification on how long the cost requirement is for them. I believe they said 8 years, and since we're not financial partners in this agreement, I find it a little surprising that we don't want to be financial partners in the agreement, and how we could expect a termination clause without any kind of compensation to the province if we did have an early termination rate. So if it's 8 years, I don't think we would want a termination rate, because there would be a significant cost involved to us.
Is that a question?
Is that correct? We would, if we were looking at a termination rate, there would likely be a cost involved with that. It wouldn't be an open-ended one like OLG has.
I mean, that would be a matter of what they negotiate back with us. If we negotiate for a termination clause, they may ask for that.
But they've made it quite clear they've calculated the term of the lease based on cost recovery, have they not?
They have claimed that they need at least 8 years for cost recovery. We could, when we negotiated a termination clause, we could maybe not have the termination for the first 8 years. That would be one way to address it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Demoff, I have procedural questions for you. Councillor Khan?
Yeah, I guess this is for our council as well. What is the rationale, and maybe for the benefit of everyone here, what's the rationale for OLG refusing to make any amendments to their contract? What have they provided us?
Their position when they've said that they didn't want to make any amendments to the agreement, they were basing it on the criminal code section, which in essence says that they need to be the operating mind of the lottery scheme, in this case the bingo. So they're concerned about giving up anything that would make it so they're not the operating mind of the bingo.
I guess they could still be the operating mind and negotiate a contract. That doesn't make, nullify them from being the operating mind. I'm just trying to get an understanding.
Well, through Mr. Chair, their position has been that they would not give up anything on the various points that we have raised with them, because they wanted to make it absolutely clear that they were the operating mind. Our position was, yes, they could give up certain rights and still be the operating mind. That was our position, but that hasn't been the position that they have taken to date.
And then are we aware of OLG making any amendments with any other municipality?
Through you, Mr. Chair, not to our knowledge. But on the other hand, we are one of the first to be considering this issue as well.
The other thing is that, and this created a little bit of confusion for me, OLG provided us a letter stating that they would not have slot machines in Oakville. I see in your report, from the ASC report, you have indicated that this is a non-binding undertaking. Perhaps you can clarify this position?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the OLG has taken the position that this is a non-contractual arrangement. So that is, we've just characterized it the way they have characterized it to us.
Councillor Noel.
Thank you, Worship. A couple of quick questions. First of all, I would ask staff if they could potentially, or somebody could potentially report back to council on the responses from Mr. Coe from the OLG with respect to his position on further negotiations, because he did soften his position on behalf of the OLG at last meeting. So I think for the benefit of other members of council who may not have been there, could somebody please, not that I haven't already done it, but could somebody please recap that portion of the meeting, because I think that's critical today.
Through you, Mr. Chair, when we pointed out, or I guess it was the mayor that pointed out to Mr. Coe that in their agreement with the hall operator, there was an ability for the hall operator to say no to slot machines and video lottery terminals. He took it at that point that that was a good point and that he would consider that. We've had some preliminary discussions with Mr. Coe, and he's waiting for council resolution before he'll sit down and talk with staff about any potential amendment.
So at this point in time, he's aware of what is before council in terms of the recommendation from administrative services, and they're expecting a response to that, and at that point they will work with staff and with our delegates, the mayor and the clerk, to finalize an agreement. Is that correct?
That's the indication that we've received
Okay.
through you, Mr. Chair.
So now we're hearing a potential new motion if we were to defeat this original recommendation that talks about the creation of a collateral agreement as opposed to, I guess, an amendment to the standard form agreement. What's the distinction between a collateral agreement and amending the standard form agreement? And is there an advantage or disadvantage to either one of these, I guess, schemes to achieve our goal?
I think, through you, Mr. Chair, I think at the end of the day, legally, you'd be in the same position whether you had an amendment to the draft standard agreement or whether you had a collateral agreement that in effect would amend the standard agreement. Probably the advantage of having it all in one place if you amended the standard agreement. But I think legally, we'd be in the same position if they had an amending agreement or a collateral agreement and the standard agreement.
So if there were to be a collateral agreement as, I guess, a rider to this agreement, that would apply strictly to this agreement and not necessarily to future agreements. We'd be dealing with this again if there were ever to be another competitive operator that would come before council.
We would be facing this again with a standard agreement. Presumably, though, if they agreed to it in a collateral agreement this time around, they'd agree to it in a collateral agreement next time around, but you'd have to make that assumption.
But if we had an amended standard form agreement, chances are that's what we'd be dealing with going forward. Right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes.
That's all I have right now, Your Worship. I do want to make comments when it's time to vote, unless something else comes up.
Councillor Adams.
Most of my question was already answered, but I'll ask the sort of second half of it. Since we had our meeting last week and now, has there been any new information either from OLG or from Delta? Have there been any meetings with either of those?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's been no meetings. We've had some communication with OLG, sort of explaining what staff understood the motion that was passed by ASC last week, what it would mean. And they've indicated that once council does something tonight, they'd be prepared to.
Okay, so back to your first answer. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Demoff.
Sorry, I have another question. When OLG was here, they did say that was a good point in terms of the ability to refuse products. Did they say that any of the other points in terms of cost recovery, if I recall, they said that none of those were negotiable, did they not?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think he said, he certainly agreed that the product one was a good point. Some of the others he said he might think about, but he certainly, I don't think, gave us great assurances that he would or OLG would be making movement on those other issues.
don't remember them exactly either, but I seem to remember certainly on the cost that was a fairly firm negative on any ability to negotiate that with Oakville because it would have ramifications in other municipalities, if I remember correctly. Is that not right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think he was firm on the cost.
And I would be prepared to change the motion that the agreement be signed if Councillor Knoll thinks that it would be stronger if it was in the main body of the agreement, that we negotiate for the town to have the right refuse future products as is in the operator's agreement. But I think having the other three items in this motion just does not send the strong message about what our real issue is in this.
So is your motion, do you have a separate motion, or do you in fact just wish to separate the four A, B, C, D and vote down the ones you don't like and vote up the one that you do? I think we have procedural, could we let her answer?
Can I just take a look at it again before I answer?
Sure. Page 35.
So you're saying, subject to incorporation in changes to protect the town's requirement of product control?
Well,
I'm just asking.
procedurally, if you start at the top and read down until you get to a point that you don't like it, and then start separating and voting out the pieces you don't like, and then add any that aren't, when you're done, if there's anything that you need to, you can add. So, for example, Part 1, do you have an objection to Part 1?
No.
Do you have an objection to Part 2?
I have an objection to Part 2, B, C, and D.
Okay, so in Part 2, are the only objections B, C, and D?
Yes, they are.
In that case, you have a procedural opportunity to separate B, C, and D and try to vote them down, and then you're left with what you're okay with.
So can I ask a question then? If it's left to protect the town's requirement of product control, that would leave it open for us to either negotiate within the agreement or as a collateral agreement, and then it would come back to council. Or would it be signed? I'm just wondering how, what the process would be following passing the motion if it was just A.
If it was just A, if we obtained protection of the town's requirement on preventing VLTs and slots, in our opinion, we would sign it.
I guess my question is, though, who is our? That's the mayor and the clerk?
The mayor and the clerk. And if it did not satisfy us, we would be back to council, and council would have to take a new position.
Okay, then I would be fine, rather than introducing a new motion, to just go with voting on the four items separately.
All right. So I will put the main motion, including 2A, before council, if there are no other speakers. And if Councillor Khan and Councillor Knoll wish to speak, just trying to clarify what's on the floor, and then there'll be speakers. But Councillor Khan, are you in question mode, or? Councillor Khan.
At the ASC report, it stated that staff was concerned that OLG's projected revenues under the revitalization initiative may be overestimated. What are the bases of that assumption, and do we have numbers that we believe are more accurate?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as was disclosed at the ASC meeting, the projection is what we consider to be ambitious, as it's extrapolated from 7 machines that sit in a casino in Maryland.
But we didn't extrapolate our own numbers, what we project revenue to be.
We have no basis.
Question is for council again. And this deals with, I think, something that Councillor Demov raised and Councillor Knoll raised as well, was about the amendments to the agreement. And now OLG has been very, very clear that they will not make any amendments to this agreement. On the other hand, in our discussions, on the other hand, they're saying there's a clause in here that allows for collateral agreements. Section. Can you clarify those 2 points?
Perhaps.
Well, Councillor, I think maybe it's a question for council first. Second, council's already told you that OLG was not saying, as you just described, that they would make no changes. The response to my pointing out that they had given a veto to someone else after they had been telling us they couldn't give anyone a veto, elicited, oh, and I'm playing the tape for you, oh, good point.
But in the report, it states that they were always concerned that if they wanted to keep a certain amount of consistency. And as a result, they wanted to keep this contract unamended.
The report predates the interview with the director at the meeting of the committee.
So let me go back to our council. Would you agree that this contract, or this, the contract that they presented, that was presented in the ASC reports, allows for collateral agreements?
The agreement would allow for a collateral agreement to be entered into between the parties if they agreed, yes.
And for greater clarity, we received an offer from Delta Bingo to enter into a collateral agreement in my sense of the word. And the notion here is that we would take all of these opportunities together to achieve our goal. And it's unimportant to me, actually, where the protection arises from. It's just very important to me that it be clear and reliable. Okay. So Councillor Knoll has withdrawn his desire to speak on the subject. Shall I put the main motion being 1, 2, and 2A before council? Councillor Knoll.
I withdrew any more questions. I do want to speak to the ultimate motion. Do I have the floor?
You have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Assuming that it's moved by Councillor Johnston and Councillor Knoll from before. So really, speakers are now in order, and when we've exhausted speakers, we'll vote.
I just wanted to speak when the questions were done, so we've exhausted questions. Okay. So, Your Worship, what I wanted to state was I'm going to support the original motion in its entirety. I do believe that that everybody on this council, I think ultimately at the end of the day we're legion in terms of what we're trying to accomplish here. What it really boils down to is that there seems to be some different views on how we get to that point. I think that the motion was very well crafted at the ASC, and I thank you for that, Your Worship. I think it stipulated some excellent points, and we do need to address those points. The thing that I found most helpful was the fact that our friend from the OLG was here and actually indicated that they're prepared to talk to us about this. I think we delivered a very clear message at the Administrative Services Committee meeting what our intent was, and he didn't seem to have any substantial objection. We haven't heard anything since that time. In fact, it sounds to me that from the staff that they're simply waiting to conclude this arrangement. So I'm perfectly comfortable going forward with what we've got. I think that that's what the OLG is expecting, and I think it serves the purpose of this council. I do want to say very clearly, because I've been getting, as we all have been, lots of emails from charities and employees of Delta Bingo that, I mean, I personally, and I don't think anybody around this table are against bingo or e-bingo or the modernization of the Mayfair Bingo Hall or the preservation of the social gaming activity of bingo. That's just not in question. We all recognize the valuable contribution that bingo fundraising makes to the Oakville way of life, and we're not trying to challenge that, and I'm certainly not trying to challenge that. We're simply trying to get to a point where we are comfortable with the agreement with the province in terms of going forward. I personally believe that we're going to get there. I think that based on the goodwill that we heard, Mr. Coe from the OLG was very helpful to us. I think the goodwill that we heard from Mr. Coe at the meeting, perhaps they were not as aware of the desires of this council to provide those assurances from simply the correspondence and the conversations going on. When they heard us say this, the gentleman said on many occasions, that's a good point. We haven't thought of that. And so I think that at the end of the day, we're going to get our agreement. And I think at the end of the day, Mr. Johnstone and his colleagues will have their modernization. We just need to hold on a little bit longer, and we need to get this thing right. Because if we don't get it right, we're going to be picking up the pieces later on in terms of gaming that we don't want to have in this community, because it is open-ended. And I would not feel right going back to my constituents saying that I authorize the signature on an open-ended agreement which could lead to some point there being undesirable gaming activities in this town. One of the ladies from one of the charities, I actually asked the question, do you object to VLTs? And she said, absolutely, I don't want VLTs in this town. So what's the problem? So I think we need to stick to the course, stay legion on this so that the province knows how united this council is in terms of wanting to achieve our ultimate goal. Send that message. Let's get this thing done. It's only a couple more weeks, and then we can move on, and Mr. Johnstone and his colleagues and all the charities can get their bingo done. But let's not complicate it and drag this thing on any longer and negotiate sidebar agreements or collateral agreements. We know what we want to do. We've stipulated it. The OLG has stated here that that's a possibility. I think we move forward and we take them at their word, and we look for the goodwill that we've already had established. I'm sorry, I keep saying Mayfair Bingo. It's Delta Bingo. I apologize for that.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Councillor Demoff.
I actually agree with everything my colleague has said. And I think that protecting the town's requirement of product control is something that every single person in this room, everyone is in agreement on. And I think that's the one issue that we need to send a strong message to the province on, and it's the one issue that OLG stood here and said, good point, and that they would look at. When it comes to exit clauses, we're not financial partners in this deal. I think that it's something that we shouldn't be looking at. I think cost recovery is something that OLG stood here and said they wouldn't change, if I recall correctly, and if they change it for us, they have to change it for every other municipality. And appropriate reciprocity to me is just too vague. So I think if we stick with A and send a really strong message to OLG that this is what we want control of what games are being played in the town of Oakville. My fear, and it's a very real fear, that OLG just says, you know what, there's lots of places that want this. Mississauga, the report was coming, I believe it was today or tomorrow. They could go to Milton. They don't have to be in Oakville. So I think we send a really strong message that we want control of the products and leave all the other stuff which are really not pertinent to what we're talking about, leave them off.
Thank you, Councillor Demoff. Any others? Councillor Adams.
This first item around product control is, it looks unanimous to me, and I think we should have a recorded vote on that element, please.
Recorded votes are available on request, so you will have it. I wonder if all speakers are done, if I might say a quick word. Members of council who weren't at administrative services and members who were, I remind you that Mr. Coe told us when I was questioning him that Mississauga had issues with the contract as well. And when I asked what the issues were, he said that Mayor Hazel had objections to the cost recovery element. And I asked him what he was going to do about it. And he said he was going to work with Mississauga to show them that they weren't going to lose any money. And so I would suggest to you that if you don't adopt that item, you put yourself in a position where Hazel potentially gets a better deal than you do. So she is the second greatest mayor in the world. She was rated so in an international survey. And I do believe that we have, a benefit from living as close as we do to her, that we could take a lesson from her on at least that point. I won't speak longer. Councillor Knoll spoke very well, and I agree with all that he said. I will now put before you the motion, sections 1, 2, and 2A, and I will ask you to rise to be named if you are in support. Councillor Khan, Councillor Adams, Councillor Grant, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Lapworth, Councillor Elgar, Mayor Burton, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Bird, Councillor Demoff, Councillor Duddick, Councillor Robinson, and Councillor Johnston. Those elements carry. I will now, if there are no other speakers, put B, appropriate changes to the exit clauses before you. There's no request for a recorded vote, so I will ask for a show of hands if you are in favor of B. And if you are opposed, please raise your hand. B carries. I will now put C, cost recovery, before you. And I'll ask that you raise your hands to show support. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And C carries. I'll now put D, appropriate reciprocity, in front of you. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. All those opposed? And D carries. Thank you very much. And that concludes all the work we're doing tonight on Administrative Services Committee. I think it's very plain what's happened. I think everyone here who is concerned about this issue from both the angles should leave here with at least the degree of optimism that I have and that Councillor Knoll has expressed, that we will arrive at a good spot. So thank you everyone for your interest. I'm not supposed to allow that, but you see how weak I am on that. I would now draw Council's attention to the Community Services Committee report. And it may be that some of our guests do not wish to linger with us. And if that's, I'll give a quick 5-minute recess so that the meeting isn't disrupted by your departure. But if you're leaving, please don't leave in inches. Thank you. Good night. All right, I'll call the meeting of council back to order. And on community services, we have I think we have two things to do here. One is, or do we only have the one separation? Councillor Elgar has asked for separation of item 2. It's a popular number tonight. And so I would put the rest of the committee report to you as soon as I get a mover and a seconder. I think I have a mover from Councillor Khan and Councillor Grant as a seconder. And all in favor? Opposed, if any? And that is adopted. Councillor Elgar.
Yes, Your Worship. I think we have a great opportunity here to present what the town staff are doing related to the Emerald Ash Borer program. And at Community Services, I ask that this presentation be presented to the full council in the event that it also would be fully available to the public, because there's an awful lot of interest in this project and a lot of hopeful people that it will actually work. So I look forward to the presentation. I think a lot of people in TV land will also going forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor, for the initiative. Staff, Mr. McNeil? And anyone else? Mr. McNeil. Council looks forward to your edification.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Burton, members of council, ladies and gentlemen. The Forestry Section of the Parks and Open Space Department is pleased to present the 2012 Emerald Ash Borer Plan. Emerald ash borer has been referred to as an ecological and economic tornado. It perhaps very fitting that on the night that Environment Canada has issued a high wind advisory, there is in council chambers another ill will blowing, and it's with regard to this subject, the emerald ash borer. Economic because from the city of Montreal in the northeast to the state of Missouri in the southwest and every community in between, Canadians and Americans are facing an economic impact of upwards of $10 to $12 billion in terms of economic loss caused by this invasive pest. Ecological because, as we all well know, it takes upwards of a century to mature an urban forest, in this case Palmerston Avenue in the city of Toronto. Yet the emerald ash borer can render a clear cut of this urban forest in a relatively short period of time, be it Pharmacy Avenue here in the city of Toronto, or staff has taken liberty of photoshopping Barclay Crescent in southeast Oakville to show what the threat to the ash trees lining that beautiful streetscape could pose if left unmanaged. This is Oakville's urban forest, all 1.9 million trees reflecting back green in this satellite imagery in this band. The specific threat to the urban forest is directed at approximately 9.6% of that canopy, specifically the roughly 177,000 ash trees that are growing throughout our community. And it's more in terms of just the impacts on a loss of the beautification on a beautiful street like Barclay Crescent. It also involves the loss of the ecological services that our trees produce, specifically the ash trees in the form of removing less pollutants and energy savings in our household utility bills that would be foregone if we didn't have this canopy. Council's taken this problem very seriously and from the get-go has encouraged staff to partner with leading-edge scientists, such as in this case the Canadian Forest Service. Oakville in 2010 was the first municipality in North America to make use of a new technique called branch sampling, and that produces the delimitation map that you see before you. This is a footprint of the emerald ash borer in the town of Oakville in 2010. And so once we knew where our enemy was hiding, it was possible for staff to bring forward a strategy to council in 2010 to direct the ash tree treatment program at selected areas, specifically where the insect was harboring, in order to slow the spread. And this was successfully done in 2010 with council's leadership and followed up last year where council identified a performance measure of 75% of the municipal treatable canopy to direct the ash tree treatment program. And so some 5,800 municipal street and active park ash trees have been placed under this green shield, if you will, in the ash tree protection program. This year that program involves approximately the treatment of 3,303 ash trees that are as part one of the 5-part 2012 Emerald Ash Borer Management Program. The second part of the program is the 2012 Communications Program. Through innovative use of social marketing, such as the town's first Facebook page, the Oakville Canopy Club, our web-based ash tree location map and ash tree treatment map, this has proven to be quite popular with residents who can come onto that map through www.oakville and find out whether their municipal town ash tree is included as part of the 5,800 trees in the treatment program. Mayor Burton launched the Canopy Club in June of last year, and this will be highlighted in 2012 through ongoing discussions, in fact, continuing discussions we've had with the Oakville Chamber of Commerce as late last week, where they're looking at opportunities to have their 1,800 members rally behind the Canopy Club, and discussions with Oakville residents associations, in addition to our successful open house, which we hosted last month, and as well as our participation at the Halton Eco Fest just last weekend. Because in 2012, we see as a somewhat of a tipping point for Oakville residents to fully engage the tornado of the emerald ash borer. Because simply put, residents need to hear the message that there are only two choices that this insect provides for us. On the right, you see Golden Meadow, one of the areas that's part of the treatment program and successful saving of the canopy. On the left, you see another part of town which had the ash trees too far infested to include in the treatment program, and you see what waste the emerald ash borer lays on the trees. So Oakville residents, just like the town's has faced, is a choice to engage in the treatment program or engage in the removal and replacement. Both are being conducted by the town. For those trees that are in the not meeting the criteria of treatment, there are roughly 8,700 trees on the public right-of-way and in active parks that are either too small or structurally unsound to qualify for treatment. And there are over 40,000 trees in our woodland parks that our Emerald Ash Borer Consultant Bioforest has advised are not operationally feasible to treat. So you can see that on the other side of the coin, while Oakville enjoys a leadership role in its treatment program and has won accolades and praise and is actually a model for other communities throughout the GTA in preserving ash trees, there are those that are not part of that program, and we're bringing to Council's attention that a phased-in approach to their systematic removal and replacement will be planned for this year. It's almost like rings of in a pond. When you drop a pebble into a still pond and you see the rings radiating outwards from the center, we foresee the ash tree removal program, which is the third of the 5 programs that are part of this year's 2012 EAB plan, and that's the phased-in block removal of those trees which do not qualify for treatment. Beginning phase 1 is, if you will, our ground zero for EAB, which is Iroquois Ridge South Community, not too far from this building this evening. So what we will see is subject to council approval in future years, this ring of systematic removal and replanting radiate outwards. With regards to a sub-program of the ash tree removal program is a 2012 Woodlands pilot project. We are aware that the woodland area not qualifying for treatment is going to need to receive a different approach than, say, street and active parks. And so we'll be hiring a consultant to work with staff to undertake an ash tree or ashwood utilization study. Some parts of our woodlands will generate some positive revenue from the removal of the infested ash. Others will be not in that position. So we'll be reporting back to council later this year on the results of this pilot project, which is proposed to occur in these 3 areas that are shown in the map. Because council invested in an inventory project in 2009, we have a good handle on the composition of our ash woodlands, and so you can see that there are some components, like in Morrison Valley South, close to Town Hall here, there's not very large concentration of ash, yet up at the top towards Dundas Street, there is a rather large concentration of ash, and that will have definite visual impacts as this pilot project rolls out. But with regard to canopy, as our performance measure is, it's all about canopy. And as we have council set that performance measure for 75% of the treatable canopy, hand in glove with removal will come stumping of the ash, street and park trees, and replacement of those trees. So we will be in good position to start the next generation of canopy replacement. And finally, the 5th component of the 2012 Emerald Ash program is the ash tree monitoring program. This is involving our consultant bioforest. This is, if you will, is sort of the central intelligence to guide the strategy that we've put before you. It involves ongoing monitoring, measuring, and mapping. Those green traps that have garnered much attention from members of council are part of that to help, and members of the public that help guide where we direct our treatment programs. So in summary, the 2012 EAB budget that council approved as part of the capital and operating budgets is just under 1.5 million, and it's comprised of these 5 programs with the corresponding deliverables outlined. I'll draw council's attention to where we have some ranges, such as in item 3, simply is because we don't yet have, the driver is going to be the contract price for the removals of these trees, and staff's in the process right now of soliciting bids for that. So subject to the unit price will be a range of how many trees we're able to incorporate. That concludes my presentation, and I would welcome any questions or comments from members of council.
Councillor Giddings.
Thank you very much. You mentioned the inventory of ash trees. That's public land only?
It's thank you for your question, Councillor Giddings, through you, Your Worship. It's both public trees are in the ash tree, street tree and park tree mapping that we have on the GIS. There's also a layer showing private ash trees, which I didn't put up in this presentation. In 2010, council approved a private ash tree mapping project. And again, Oakville is one of the very few communities that have that, and it's up on our through our GIS. There's a map showing areas of high probability for private ash trees, where residents can find out whether there's private ash trees in their neighborhood.
I'm always amazed and rather frustrated and surprised with the number of residents that may not be aware of the program or even aware that they have an ash tree on their property. Last year...
Stacy? Pardon me?
I know I've got one. Last year, we talked at council about whether the town would consider offering a treatment program for private individuals. And I know there were some concerns at that time in terms of liability issues or legal issues. Just wondering if that is something that we could look at further.
Through you, Your Worship, I think that that's something that staff would take back to consider and report back in, later in the year when we bring forward the Emerald Ash Borer Strategic Management Plan.
One more, thank you. We know where the beetles are, or where they're going to be. We know where the people are that are going to be infested. Could we give some thought to tracking the infestation areas by postal code, tie in something with our tax bill? We know we send tax bills to everybody, and offer an opportunity for them to pay a biannual treatment and help them cover the cost of the treatment?
Through you, Your Worship, I think that there's great potential with that suggestion. I think staff should take that back and see how we can work synergistically to perhaps with our other corporate mailings to perhaps make greater awareness achieved throughout the community.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. Councillor Elgar.
John, thanks very much for the presentation. It's greatly appreciated. I'm just wondering, for the public, where would they go to find out more information about the emerald ash borer and where, if it might be in their community? Like if they go to the town's website, what would they have to type in and how easy is it to get there? Because you've got a lot of maps, an awful lot of data, and the time of year when the treatment should be done. Because a lot of people last year found out about it, but it was too late in the season. And I'm just wondering how we can make it, all the information you have garnered to make it easy for everyone to find.
Through you, Your Worship, within the town at www.oakville.ca, we have an internal search engine. If they simply type in the words emerald ash borer, that should take them to the main part of the town's webpage. And if they're on Facebook, if they type in the Oakville Canopy Club.
Appreciate that. Another question. Removal of the ash trees, where do they go? Because it's a little bit of a concern if it's being transferred, the wood is going somewhere else. So what happens to that wood when they take the trees down?
Through you, Your Worship, we make it quite clear in our contracts that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency regulation that is in place for the disposition of ash roundwood is followed. It technically follows a double pass chipping process to make sure that the wood cannot harbor any live emerald ash borer. So wood is actually put through a chipper in 2 stages and ground down to a very small chip size. And the combination of the small chip size and the vibration has been shown to ostensibly kill the insects inside.
So large tree trunks are going through a chipper?
The large logs are going through a chipper, and the stumps are ground with mechanized equipment.
Thank you very much, and thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. McNeil, in the final pages of your presentation, it appeared that treating the trees is actually less expensive than removing the trees. And as a result, it's kind of a shame that some trees can't be reached in order to be treated. And it's a very interesting element there to the report. And I suppose that homeowners will have to keep that in mind as they contemplate whether to treat or remove. Would that be correct?
Yes, thank you for that comment. That's a very good point. The Canadian Forest Service has an economic model. Again, that's to Councillor Elgar's question about our webpage. We have a link to that where residents can do the math themselves to arrive at that conclusion.
Okay, thank you very much for your report. Councillor Elgar, the report was moved, I have forgotten.
Councillor Khan.
By Councillor Khan and Councillor Grant. And if there are no other questions, I'll now put the item that we separated to you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is adopted. And thank you very much. There are no consent items, confidential or public, and we have discussion items. And Council, I would ask you, are you satisfied with the reports that you have with respect to item 2? Because if you are, you could move those and we could release the gentlemen who were here from Oakville Hydro. And if, on the other hand, you wish to go into camera to discuss the confidential report, then we'll move the item down to the end of the meeting. Councillor Knoll.
I'll give you a motion to approve the recommendation contained in the both the public and the confidential item.
Councillor Knoll, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Elgar. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? And they are adopted. Thank you very much for being here in case we had questions. All right, that brings us to discussion item 1, the development engineering presentation to council by Darnell Lambert. And I know we're all looking forward to this. And certainly, if I was to sort into a pile the questions and items that come to the mayor's office, items involving Mr. Lambert are certainly a large pile. So this should be good for all of us. Mr. Lambert.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, and the viewing public. My name is Darnell Lambert, and I am your Director of Development Engineering. And while I am typically before you or my team presenting projects or matters of interest to the community and responding to questions the same, tonight I have the extreme pleasure of presenting to you an overview of the department and the services that we provide. Firstly, we are positioned within the Planning and Development Commission, along with our colleague departments of Building, Planning, and Economic Development. We are a department of professional engineers, foresters, arborists, engineering technicians, and technologists. We maintain strong ties with our colleague departments of engineering and construction, legal, parks and open space, finance, and roads and works operations. Outside the corporation, we collaborate routinely with Conservation Halton, the region, the school boards, the development and building industry, and most commonly, our citizens, the public, both current and prospective. Our department is set up with two main areas of focus: engineering review and permits and construction, or how I like to refer to them, the practicality and reality team. The engineering side is led by Mr. Philip Kelly, who is here with us this evening, joining us in May of 2011. The permit and construction side is led by Mr. Eric Leighton, who's also with us this evening, and also recently joining the town, but as early as October 2011. Community building is our main focus, and of the many things that go into creating a sustainable and livable community, we work to ensure that they are well designed and built through appropriate approvals, monitoring, and compliance inspections. Well connected with sound transportation networks that support a range of mobility options. Well served with public infrastructure that protects its citizens, its community structure, and the environment. Environmentally sensitive, considerate of its draw on our resources and its impact on the surrounding environment. And well maintained through the various bylaws that our department administers. So how do we ensure the achievement of these objectives? Well, long before any development gets underway, concepts move from sketches to engineering details that are developed, assessed, and if acceptable, approved. Their approval supports the forward movement of any development. So, what do we look for in good community design? We look for it to be well connected and accessible from a variety of travel modes. Traffic impact studies, I'm sure you're all familiar with those, tell us what developments need in the form of new roads, what pressure they will exert on our existing network, and identify what, if any, improvements are required. Today, we also consider the need to install traffic calming components into road designs to alter their characteristics that tend to result in high operating speeds. Retrofitting, while sometimes necessary, can be avoided with designs that consider road attributes that give rise to speed. We are now building communities with traffic calming elements built in, the first of which is now in place in the Woodland Trails community in North Oakville. I'd encourage you to take a visit. Pedestrian and cycling plans are developed to ensure new communities are planned with the pedestrian and cyclist in mind, allowing them to connect with neighboring communities and services in an efficient and an effective way. Ensuring that our communities are walkable and cycle-friendly is our goal, along with making sure that every destination is walkable and accessible by all means of travel. We recognize the active and healthy benefits of good community design, and our goal is to ensure our neighborhoods support and promote active and healthy behavior. Transit really is a better way to travel. So how do you plan and create a transit-first community? You develop a service strategy up front and you deliver transit early. It's important to our new residents to understand how and when they can connect with transit, a service that we want them to use. With a well-thought-out plan, new residents can make informed choices about where they may wish to live in relation to the service, and how it may change if interim service delivery plans are required as their community grows. While we have an overarching service plan for North Oakville, developments are required to submit plans to ensure transit services are accommodated and considered at every stage of the community's development. A well-planned community is one that equally considers all modes of transportation, and we do that. And of course, with cars comes the issue of parking. Where, how much, and for how long. These aspects are considered up front. If residents don't turn their mind to this before purchasing, we all know they do shortly thereafter. Today, we have these answers before they purchase, and we have our best foot forward in communicating to future residents. We've learned that informing our new residents up front about how their neighborhood is planned to function is key to our business and their needs. So how do we go about informing our prospective new residents? We communicate. And communicating is something we do. We have information that owners should be aware of when considering their new home purchase. We know that most homeowners, being excited about their new home purchase, seldom read the clause or the fine print 105 of their 550-page purchase and sale agreement. But you know what? They should. To improve our communication, we've developed a Welcome to the Neighborhood brochure for pre-purchasers that includes discussions on the vision for the new neighborhood, the town's achievement of the natural heritage system that surrounds most neighborhoods, and the community and neighborhood parks that can be found within, and the fact that the community, as designed, promotes transit, cycling, and walking. Respecting the need for greater detail, purchasers can see where their planned purchase is positioned with respect to transit services and stops, available on-street parking. Yes, they can even see on which side of the street parking is going to be. Noise walls, will their lot have one or not? And adjoining land uses, both current and planned. Aside from ensuring compliance with development agreements, informing people about newly planned neighborhoods prior to their purchase is something we do. As land is developed, it is changed, and so changes its response to natural events such as rainfall. Hardening the land results in increased water runoff that must be managed and controlled properly to ensure the protection of our residents, structures, and our environment. Extensive engineering work goes into determining what controls and mitigation measures are required to allow and support new development while ensuring the preservation and protection of adjacent and surrounding natural systems and neighborhoods. Properly planned developments are considerate of natural events that they may be exposed to and are designed with systems to control and manage rainwater, therein protecting our community. Well-designed and functional stormwater management systems minimize impact to the community and protect our environment. We work to ensure these objectives are met. Stormwater management reports tell us how the rainwater will be managed. This involves well-designed and built underground and above-ground systems to convey water away safely. Communities are built respecting existing natural features like streams and valley systems. Aside from roads, an underground network is designed to silently operate and remove runoff from the land. This pipe network is complemented by stormwater management ponds and an overland flow system that appears functional in heavier rainfall events, effectively directing, storing, and treating stormwater runoff for the benefit of our community and our environment. These systems are designed to respond to a range of rainfall events, the light ones and the extreme ones, to safeguard the public and its community infrastructure. Any development or redevelopment needs a servicing plan, and much like roads, advanced servicing studies are required to determine how the area will be serviced for elements like water, wastewater, and yes, even stormwater. We do advanced servicing studies like the one underway for Midtown, our most notable intensification area. While it is serviced for stormwater today, the new plan for the area will require us to relocate the existing infrastructure, and in doing so, we should consider and examine the opportunities for improving stormwater management in this area. Doing so may result in benefits for both the new community and our existing landowners downstream. This is an undertaking for us in 2012, and we do these types of studies. We support and encourage low-impact developments. The use of bioswales, infiltration trenches, and porous pavements provide opportunities to reduce the amount of runoff from a site, thus reducing the size of management systems that otherwise need to be built to accommodate this additional water. These are but a few of the environmentally friendly ways of managing stormwater runoff. And of course, trees. This council understands the benefit of trees to its community health and has adopted a 40% canopy cover goal by 2057 in support of its goal to be the most livable town in Canada. While we work to build this future state, we also are protective of the trees that currently serve our community. Presently, there are two responsible departments for managing our interest in trees: Development Engineering and my colleagues in the Parks and Open Space Department. Our focus is on development and its impact or potential impact to trees, both public and private. We require development proposals to assess tree canopy conditions, and to define how their proposal fits in within the existing environment. While extensive work went into defining the natural heritage system in North Oakville, new developments within our existing built area are the most challenging for our urban forestry staff. We manage the issues of tree protection, preservation, and removal, unfortunately, associated with development. We work with the private and municipal tree bylaw on a day-to-day basis, and while the answer to the question of if a tree falls, do you hear it, is definitely yes, our successes are the trees that do not fall, and these daily environmental wins are mostly silent. On a daily basis, developers and builders are required to assess, protect, and mitigate community trees successfully through their development projects in situations that in the past would have resulted in undue harm to the tree. Council, through the municipal and private tree bylaw, has vastly improved the protection and preservation of our trees. This is a community success, and upholding these bylaws is part of what we do. To ensure compliance with approved plans, third-party professional engineers continuously oversee the progress of construction. Our role allows us to provide routine oversight of the work underway in the field. We check in with the engineers routinely to review quality assurance testing results, approve plan deviations, and monitor the overall progress of the development. We are the public contact for concerns from our citizens regarding construction status, dust and mud and access and plan achievement, and so on. We work to ensure quality standards are achieved and that our new public infrastructure operates correctly and lasts for its planned lifetime. On the private side, we ensure that the new building lots are constructed and graded according to plan. And once achieved, homeowners routinely modify the land, and we are there to provide our guidance on how to put it all back together again. Aside from the common subdivision and site plan developments, we also issue permits for activities such as site alterations. Simply put, if you intend to modify the drainage pattern of your property, come to see us, please. We do realize that some owners modify their lot unintentionally. And that usually means your neighbor will be in to see us, and then we'll be out to see you. Lot drainage is what we do. And lastly, we assist our residents in achieving their dreams of owning a pool safely. The town's pool enclosure bylaw requires one to ensure that their new pool is installed with the proper safety mechanisms in place prior to filling their pool. We are one of the few communities that mandate this sign-off, elevating the requirement to ensure safety of our neighborhoods. We work to ensure pool safety measures are in place. To close, we are involved in creating our sustainable and livable community, and we work to ensure that they are well designed and built, well connected, well served with public infrastructure, environmentally sensitive, and well maintained. Our role, simply put, is to plan and build a sustainable and livable Oakville. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lambert. If we were allowed to applaud, I would. That was one of the highest production values I've seen in a PowerPoint.
Thank you.
So you raised the bar now. We're going to expect this from everyone. Councillor Knoll has questions.
Thank you, Worship. I've always said that Mr. Lambert deserves an Oscar for his PowerPoints. I've been watching them for years. I particularly like the animated ones where the streets actually appear, and it's wonderful. I'm really interested in the campaign or the process of getting information about development engineering into the hands of new residents. And I've seen the materials that have been produced. How are we actually getting them into the hands of residents? And the reason I ask this question, I'll just give you a bit of a preface. What we're seeing now, particularly as North Oakville's opening up and the two new subdivisions that have sold out in Ward 5 within days, is that it's not like the old days where people got to come in and to kick the tires and pick up the pamphlets and really understand what they're buying. You're told to arrive at a certain time with a certified check, and you better be prepared to buy now, or there's 1,000 other people behind you. In that instance, it's very hard to really have a chance to sit down and talk to people or get the materials. How are we adapting ourselves to the new reality of the new growth that's occurring in North Oakville so that we can make sure that this great information is getting to them? Because I'm already getting the calls, particularly from the new Trinidad development, people saying, what is this, what is that? And so obviously they're not getting the message.
Well, I can tell you that we have a presence in the sales pavilion. There's an actual table set up there, and you're right. We can get the information to them. Having them actually read through it and use it as part of making their informed decision is a difficult task. But for right now, we can at least get that to them, avail ourselves to any questions that they have and may come in. And again, if you've seen the brochure, it is a very simple read. And we've tried to put a lot of that information that we know they would generally ask. Where is the parking going to be? Where would the park be? And put that on that one-page fold-out map that hopefully they can and will avail themselves to.
I fully agree, and I think that we've come light years from when I first got here, and it was sort of all done almost on a wing and a prayer that people understood what the town's position was on development engineering. My concern, though, is that we're still not able to access those new buyers. And I'm wondering if the staff has given any thought to how we might be more proactive in that respect. For example, maybe signage on the actual lot, so when people come in to check out their homes or when they're moving into the new subdivision, they can actually see a sign that says, "Come and see Darnell," and his great PowerPoints.
Well, there are a number of signs within the development agreement that developer is responsible to put up. I think the issue is actually getting that information way out in front. Because you're right, the Trinisons, the Davis Minardi, those subdivisions sold out, as you say, in 3 days. So whether or not owners or prospective buyers are actually wanting to avail themselves of all that information up front, we can certainly try to get that out even earlier electronically to them. Again, making them read it, though, is a difficult task.
It's not all bad, though, Councillor. Look on it as an opportunity to develop a relationship with the new resident.
I agree with that, and I have done that in a few cases, but sometimes they're not happy opportunities. And that's why I give them Mr. Darnell's phone number.
I'm glad to answer the calls.
Just kidding.
As councillors, that's what we have staff for, I agree. Councillor Robinson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Darnell, who decides the construction routes for developers and/or builders? Which department makes these decisions?
There's normally a collaboration between ourselves and our engineering and construction department. And typically we will want to look at if there is material leaving the site, where is it destined to, so that they can take the shortest route and ideally be moving upward through the classification of roads. So if they're coming out of a collector, they should move up to an arterial so as not to disrupt the area, or it has as minimal impact as possible.
And how do you go about enforcing that?
Well, through staff and, if necessary, through the involvement of the police services department.
Do you find from time to time that builders, probably builders even more so than developers, but do you find that they're often in violation?
I will say we do visit the issues more than I care to. We're usually abundantly clear as to the route that they should travel. We have an open discussion with them. If there's a deviation, why do you need to deviate from the route? And again, the issue tends to be more one of the volume of the trucks and the cleanup that would follow along behind the trucks.
I want to thank you for your continued perseverance in trying to make that work. But the last question is, do we have any type of penalty or anything we can do to make them realize that they are in violation and hit the pocketbook?
I'd probably take that one on. Through you, Mayor Burton, certainly we put stipulations in, but the difficulty you get on, these are public highways. And we do solicit their cooperation, and I know Mr. Lambert does carry a little bit of a stick there, but at the end of the day, they are legally on the streets. And so we can, push, shove, but you can't get into penalties. Now, if it's a town contract, when we have done that, where we've insisted how this would be done. But these are not all town contracts. They are private properties that are developing. There are a public street system. Now, it is usually in the interest of most developers and most builders to actually keep the trucks on one route. But you do get many trades who are simply that. They're a trade, they're someone doing work within the development. So I wouldn't want to give the impression that we control all those activities. We do not have that legal ability, as they are public streets. Coming from former director.
Thank you, Ray. Ray, I do know how hard you and all your people work at that, trying to accomplish it. Thank you.
And we will always persevere. I mean, we will continue.
Thank you.
Our greatest power is the power to encourage. Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship, and to add my voice to those congratulating you on the work that you do. You had mentioned in new subdivisions, when it comes to existing or mature neighborhoods, has any consideration been given to something similar to what you provided with the pamphlet? There's a lot of urban legends around there in regards to what the town can and cannot do, and what the rights of a property owner are in relationship to say, an intensification project or a one of your neighbor is doing something, so what your rights are. Is there any kind of a Coles Notes version in the offing?
That's probably one that I've only recently turned my mind to, given the issues that have come up. I will always encourage open dialogue between two neighbors. Absolutely up front, have a chat with your neighbor. You would like to do this, you're working close to the property line, make them aware. But as we far too often find, that doesn't happen. And how much the town actually wants to go out and communicate on behalf of the developing party is a very fine line. Again, we will always encourage that open dialogue, make sure it's happening. And where we can, we'll infuse that encouragement by saying, well, you can't do that until you get consent or have a discussion with your neighbor.
I think those are the sort of things that a lot of people would like to be aware of prior to the point that they can do that, and to know that whether it be something pertaining to the tree or a shared fence or something of that nature, what are private matters and what come under the purview of the town of Oakville in terms of protecting their rights. So yes, if you need assistance in a Coles Notes, we're here.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dudek. Councillor Dudek, would you and Councillor Robinson favor us with a motion and a second for the recommendation on the item?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Any others? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Then that is adopted. Council, that brings us to item number 3, which is the casino location in GTA resolution, which is brought to us by Councillor Johnston and Councillor Robinson. And the chair recognizes Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's quite appropriate this evening that this would be on the agenda, given what we've had. Especially since the province is looking at expanding all forms of gambling in the GTA. And if we go back to 1997, 85% of the voters said they weren't in favour of casinos and slots in Oakville then. I believe that holds true today. And I'm going to ask Council to endorse this resolution that we tell the OLG that the town of Oakville is not interested in entertaining any proposal to locate a casino or slot machines within its municipal boundaries. And I'm pleased to note that MPP Flynn also endorses that resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Robinson.
Speaking to that motion, Your Worship, I'd just like to remind Council by going back another 15 or 16 years in history when I became involved with then Detective Sergeant Mike Eckert of Drugs, Morality and Intelligence with the Halton Regional Police Services, and a couple of people from the OLG organization and a couple of other people. Unfortunately, we at this point can't locate any specific set of recommendations or documents. I know that I've talked with Mike Eckert on the phone as of a couple of days ago. He's retired and living up in Muskoka. And he reminds me that he did an abundance amount of interviewing with both the OPP and the OLG people. And there was a tremendous amount of concern that this was even coming forward to Oakville by the province back those 16 years ago. Because what had happened, the province identified 10 sites in Ontario that they thought would be appropriate for VLTs and other types of gambling and casinos. Burlington, Oakville, and Milton were 3 of them. It was the issue of this type of research that was being done by that particular committee that precipitated the non, I guess you call it a non-legal vote. That's not the word I'm looking for, but you know what I'm talking about. The non-binding referendum, which substantially voiced the opinion of the majority of people in Oakville that voted. And the end result of this entire exercise was that Mrs. Milton took the facility at the Mohawk Raceway, not the railway, the raceway. And the province pulled back on both Oakville and Burlington. So this is a pretty strong message from 10 to 16 years ago that we're talking about again right now. It's really the same thing. So I'm very glad to see this motion before us this evening.
Thank you, Councillor. Any others? if you'll permit, I'll offer you one little nugget. When the revival of the idea, when the notion of a casino in the GTA was floated, and the reaction in Toronto appeared to be somewhat reluctant, I was called by the media and asked to comment. And I remember one of the reporters saying to me, Mr. Mayor, the community impact payment would be approximately $150 million a year. And he said, isn't that more than your town tax levy? And will you want a casino? And I said, well, I have no recent reading on the public view of that, but if I had to bet, I said, I would bet that Oakville would rather pay taxes and be self-supporting than have a casino that paid them more than their property tax. And some of that actually made it into I would bet they wouldn't like it, that made it in. So if there's no other speakers, I will call the vote on the motion by Councillor Johnston and Robinson. All those in favor, raise your hands. Opposed, if any? And that does carry. And that brings us to item number 4, the separation of Great Lakes and Mississippi River Basin waterways, moved by Councillor Johnston and seconded by Councillor Robinson. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you once again. This is actually the reinstating of the separation of the Great Lakes and the Mississippi. At one time they weren't joined. There was a study carried out by the Great Lakes Commission and the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, and it basically shows it's both economically and ecologically sound solution to institute this separation. So I'm asking Council to support this, and you'll notice we're asking to forward the resolution on to the various levels of orders of government, and ask the U.S. government to proceed forthwith. Thank you.
And your role in the Great Lakes group, would you just explain that?
I am the Halton Region representative in the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, and we'll be meeting this year to discuss, and one of the things on the agenda is this separation, and I will be bringing it forward at that time.
Thank you, Councillor. Any others? All in favor then? Opposed, if any? And that is carried. Item 5 is the provincial payment in lieu of taxes, moved by Councillor Johnston and seconded by Councillor Adams. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you. Once again, it comes to the table. Previous years, Councillor Bird and I believe Gittins. So we keep going. I mean, there is no logical, stable basis of funding for payment in lieu of taxes, and this is just one more time asking the provincial government to step up to the plate and provide one. So, thank you.
I think it's been well said, and this council has dealt with this very same matter numerous times over. The timing of this is what's important here tonight, given the discussion that's ongoing down at Queen's Park over their budget, and we hope that perhaps in their negotiating they'll remember us.
Thank you, Councillor. All those in favor then? Opposed, if any, and that is adopted. Item number 6, the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, MPAC. A motion by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Johnston. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Many of us are familiar with the content of the wish here, because I'm sure you've all had the same problems that Alan and I have been having, but kind of came to bold attention when an individual approached us about the fact that she had won an appeal, but she couldn't get her taxes rebated because of a lot of legislative disharmony that hadn't been resolved. I met with staff, Alan and I met with staff, including Erica, and we decided that we should support some of the other municipalities in our region that have already presented this resolution, and the format is asking the MPAC and the province to give some thought to designing terms of reference and clarity and understanding just exactly what MPAC can do, what it means to the person that appeals the taxes, and alleviate all the concerns that continue to erupt because nobody knows what's going on.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Johnston, did you want to say anything?
I think it's been covered quite well, but it's just asking to streamline the process.
All right. Councillor DeMoff?
Having also been involved with this, there's a perception by taxpayers that we're responsible for this because they're paying their taxes to us, when in fact, when it comes to the property assessment, it really falls to the province. And I think it's important for people to know who's responsible for what, not unlike other issues we've dealt with at this council. During our meeting, I likened it to the QEW that runs through the middle of town, and as much as our residents might like us to lower the speed limit to 80 kilometers an hour, we have no power to do that. So I think there needs to be also better cooperation with us in terms of when these issues come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeMoff. Councillor Robinson? Okay, it's noted, but I don't believe any punishment's in order. We know you meant well. If there are no other speakers, I'll put the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and any against? That carries. And that brings you to your information items, which have been circulated electronically, and you also have your status of outstanding issues report. And I'm advised that there are two notices of motion for tonight. One by Councillors Alan Elgar and Kathy Duddock on the urban forest to lift it from the table and bring it forward to May 22nd's P&D. And the other from Councillor Max Kahn and Councillor Kathy Duddock to celebrate the 30th anniversary tomorrow of the Canadian Charter. And since both of these are time sensitive, I thought there might be unanimous consent to waive the procedure bylaw in order to permit you to consider them tonight. Is there any objection to considering them tonight? I'll be glad to take that as a motion from Councillors Duddock and DeMoff. All in favor? Opposed? The procedure is waived. And we will turn first to Councillor Elgar and Councillor Duddock on the urban forest. Councillor Elgar?
Your Worship, the motion is that the North Oakville Urban Forestry Strategic Management Plan tabled at the Planning and Development Council meeting be lifted from the table and brought forward for consideration at the Planning and Development Council meeting on May the 22nd, 2012.
Thank you very much. Councillor Duddock, did you have anything to say? Thank you. Any others? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That does carry. Councillor Kahn.
Your Worship, 30 years ago tomorrow was a remarkable day in Canadian history. It was the day that Canada recognized human rights and freedoms as part of our supreme law, that being the Constitution. So I move this motion in that spirit. Therefore, be it resolved that the town of Oakville recognize and celebrate the significance the Charter serves as a common thread in the fabric of Canada and the importance of the Charter to our unique identity.
Thank you very much. That's well said. Any remarks from Councillor Duddock? Councillor Kahn's eloquence has served us all. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that also carries. That brings us to regional reports and question period regarding town boards and advisory committees. I see no business for you. Councillor Robinson?
Well, I was just wondering, there's another request for a report.
We're arriving at requests for reports as you
Oh, well, we just did, I thought we just did two. Oh, I'm sorry,
In fact, you haven't even jumped the gun. The chair recognizes you, Councillor Robinson.
Good night. This is a request for a report moved by myself, seconded by Councillor DeMoff. I'll read it and then speak very briefly to it. That in recognition of the increased use of tanning beds by youth and the negative impact from exposure to ultraviolet radiation, staff be requested to report back on the potential to regulate tanning salons by introducing an age restriction prohibiting youth from using these facilities in Oakville. And Councillor DeMoff seconds that. She'll probably speak to it, but very briefly, I was approached maybe a month or so ago now by a lady by the name of Annette Sear, which happens to live in Ward 1, and she is also the Canadian chair of the Melanoma Association of Canada. She's been diagnosed with the incurable melanoma twice, and she's still going strong. And the big concern that they're trying to get some traction on is the youth that are using these tanning beds. They would like to see something happen to prevent youth under the age of 19 from using them. So therefore, we're asking for a staff report. I have met with the legal department. Pam and I met with the legal department and the clerk last week, and this is our position so far.
Councillor Dumont?
I would like to speak to this because it's timely that it's coming to us tonight because, as all of you know, I chair the Terry Fox Run. Councillor Robinson is the past chair of the Terry Fox Run, and it was last week when we met with legal counsel on the same day that it was the anniversary of Terry Fox dipping his leg in the Atlantic Ocean and starting the Marathon of Hope. And tomorrow we're kicking off Team Up for Terry here in Oakville. And I know I'm getting off track, but...
Wednesday.
Sorry, Wednesday. I know, he told me, sorry, Wednesday we're kicking off the Team Up for Terry Fox Run. And both of us, Councillor Robinson and I, have had a long involvement with the issue of cancer, and this is something that is so eminently easy to do and would make a huge difference to the amount of skin cancer rates going forward, because young people, when they're exposed to these tanning beds, are so much more likely to get skin cancer later on. So we can make a difference just by regulating youth from going into them. So I'm really happy to second it, especially as we head into the Team Up for Terry Fox breakfast. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And would that be at 7:30 on Wednesday morning?
That would be at 7:30 on Wednesday morning in the South Atrium. Yes, it would.
Well, and it's very good to have the correction that it's Wednesday and not Tuesday, lest we have to go at 7:30 twice. So thank you very much for that. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Council, that brings us to consideration and reading of the bylaws. Councillor Duddick moves. Councillor Elgar seconds. And this is for the following bylaws: 2012-14, and 2012-34, and 2012-39, as printed on the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? The bylaws are adopted. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Councillor Knoll.
Sorry, I know this is out of order, but I just wanted to wish our colleague, Councillor Bird, a very happy birthday. Today's his birthday.
Oh my! Well, that's wonderful. Thank you very much for that. That completes our agenda. Thank you for your time and attention, and it's been great working with you. Good night.